Going to start. So hi everyone, welcome to Chernobyl to COVID, an interview presented by Jan Leyfman and Kate Samuelson. My name is Georgina and I am the lead moderator for this session. So I'm here to ensure that this session runs as smoothly and safely as possible. Please let me know if you have any concerns or questions by messaging me in the chat function. So in order to make this a welcoming environment and also show off the fact that we have participants from all over the world, please ensure that you have changed your name to state your full name and your city. You can rename yourself by hovering over your mouse, by hovering your mouse over your name in the Participants tab and clicking the Rename button. In order to get the best experience with no distractions, we recommend you watch this session in Speaker View. You can change from Gallery View to Speaker View by clicking the Speaker View button in the top right-hand corner of the Zoom window. So we'd really like you to turn your video on during this session. Being able to see each other helps to create more of a community atmosphere, and for security reasons, we may remove people who don't have their video turned on. So if you have a question at any point in the session, you should message me, as I said earlier, using the chat function. We will leave some time for a Q&A at the end. And if you would like me to ask a question to the presenter in this Q&A, I will explain how that will work when we get to the end of the session. So I hope you enjoy this session. And once again, I'm pleased to introduce Jan and Kate. Over to you guys.
Hi, sorry, I think I was on mute there. Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. My name's Kate Samuelson and I'm a journalist and writer and charity worker based in London. And it's nice to virtually meet you all. I had the pleasure of interviewing Jan about 2 months ago now for an article for the Jewish Chronicle, the big Jewish newspaper in the UK. And his story was absolutely fascinating. And I hope you enjoy hearing a bit more about him and his interesting history and his work on COVID-19 today. And as Georgina said, please do feel free to ask questions at any time. It'd be great to get the session as interactive as possible. And I'm going to be kind of leading on asking Jan questions, but if there's anything that you think you'd like to know about that I haven't raised, I'd love you to be able to ask and get involved. So I'd like to kind of start by asking Jan to tell us a little bit about his earliest memories. He was born in 1989 in eastern Belarus, which was 3 years after Chernobyl. So Jan, can you tell us a bit about Chernobyl, what Chernobyl was for those of us who might not understand the history as well, and also a bit about your kind of earliest memories?
Yes. First, I want to say from the outset, thank you everyone for having me. It's truly a pleasure to be here on this great forum. So yes, I was born in '89. Chernobyl happened in '86. I was born about 90 miles away from Chernobyl. And basically, Chernobyl is deemed one of the worst, if not the worst, nuclear disaster in modern history. It basically struck all of Europe essentially with radiation permeating throughout the region. Now, the thing is, it was not a singular event. Until the reactor was contained, the radiation was still pervading through all of Europe as a whole. And so constantly from the day that I was born, I was being exposed to large amounts of radiation, and not just me, everyone in my town. And because of that, people were dying left and right eventually. And if they were not, then Chernobyl was on a molecular level causing mutations and increasing their propensity for a lot of diseases, which sadly have and continue to follow a lot of the survivors like a black cloud over their heads to this day. Basically, by the time I was age 2 to 3, I began to feel ill, requiring me to go through to seek medical attention. Sadly, none of the providers that I saw were able to tend to my needs, and I was getting these outlandish diagnoses, so to speak, anywhere from herpes to HIV, where a lot of the providers didn't know what was wrong with me. And in essence, a lot of the time they were saying, well, to my mom, we're not sure what's going on with him, but if you leave him here, we can do some experiments here and there, and maybe we'll try to get to the bottom of it. Obviously, my mom said no. So it was a difficult time for everyone. I regressed in my development. I did develop early. Before age 1, I could walk and I could speak as well. And obviously, the radiation poisoning, which is what we believe is what I had, what basically caused me to have lymphedema all over and cysts all over my body. It was a very trying time. One, because from a patient standpoint, what was going on with you. Two, I was still really young and I didn't fully comprehend or appreciate the complexity of what was going on with me. And obviously, being a kid, I was grouchy a lot of the time, itchy all over, painful cysts and things to that effect. So, yeah.
It must have been such a frightening time for your parents, not really understanding what was wrong with you, but also you being so young that you wouldn't have been able to fully express and explain the pain that you were in and what you were going through. And
that's completely accurate.
And your parents ended up taking you to Israel for medical treatment. And I was wondering if you could explain a bit about how that happened. I know it was very difficult for you to leave the country and the Belarusian government weren't too keen on it. Can you tell everyone a bit about what happened?
Right. So eventually, we were going from clinic to clinic, from hospital to hospital over the Soviet Union. Then in the last hospital where we were at, my condition was depreciating, where day by day I was becoming as white as a piece of paper. I was losing all my energy. I was really unable to eat, and the food that they served was typically milk, and I was lactose intolerant. And basically, we saw that the only thing that they were really giving me was painkillers, but nothing to really improve my condition. And it really came to a point where I was probably weeks from dying if things progressed in the way that they did. Thankfully, my grandparents moved to Israel when I was 1. And when they heard what was happening to me, they immediately sent all the life savings that they had to allow me and my mom to seek medical treatment there. Obviously, the Soviet government was not keen on it, but it basically came to a point where, do you want people dying, or are you going to just allow him to seek treatment, so that he can live at the end of the day? Because in my town, people were dying left and right for unknown reasons with no known diagnoses, and no one could really explain what was going on. So thankfully, they eventually relented, and I was able to go to Israel for about 6 months and seek medical attention there.
What do you think, this might be quite a morbid question, but if you hadn't been able to get that medical treatment in Israel, what do you think would have happened to you?
Probably what happened to sadly a lot of the kids in that hospital. So as I was leaving the hospital, in the back, they turned the parking lot into a graveyard, and essentially with pots and plots for all of the people there. And, that is something that to this day is an image that is still ingrained in my mind. That would have been my fate had I not taken the initiative, had my parents not taken the initiative, taken the risk, and, got me the medical attention that I deserved. I would not be here today. And I'm extremely grateful to the medical care that I received in Israel, to the great providers that instilled hope in me, but also provide me with great medical care at the end of the day. I saw a contrast between the medical care that I got Soviet Union to Israel, how quickly I was able to recover, and that inspired me to want to give back, because at the end of the day, I was probably one of the sole survivors from that hospital in the Soviet Union. And maybe there is some survivor's guilt, but I try to channel that in a positive way. And I'll never forget where I came from. And I use that to empower me every single day in everything that I do.
Absolutely. And that's definitely something that we'll touch on again a bit later. So after you sought treatment in Israel, you ended up moving to New York with your family. Is that right?
Almost. So so after our 6-month visa expired, we actually had to go back to the Soviet Union. By that time, my parents began to realize that it's untenable for me to remain there. So we basically were trying to see what are the options, and having family in the United States, and knowing about the vast opportunities that are available there and for my future, despite my parents having great careers in the Soviet Union, they gave everything up just so that I could live. And that is also part of the reason why I didn't have any siblings, because I was ill and my mom couldn't consciously have any more children, expose them to that environment, so that she wouldn't have a repeat of what happened to me. So in essence, we had to go and leave somewhere. So the United States seemed like the most fruitful option. I also got sick when I came back. Again, thankfully not to the same extent, but I was declining again. And so ultimately we had to go through the necessary channels in the Soviet Union, explain ourselves why we were leaving. Once again, they didn't want us to leave, but literally we basically said, either he dies on your conscience or you allow us to leave so he can get treatment and he can survive. Ultimately, they relented, and thankfully, we were able to immigrate to the United States. And that's where I'm here in the United States to stay.
And speaking to us, now from the United States. So thanks for explaining about your kind of childhood and how you got to the US. And when you were a student at high school, that's when you first became interested in medicine. Is that correct?
Yes. So I had an inkling that I wanted to do, ever since Chernobyl and my past, I had an inkling, and the profound impact that the providers in Israel had on me. I always wanted to kind of give back. And medicine seemed like the ideal area to do so. My aunt, she is a nurse in Israel, and that is where I feel a lot of that love for medicine stems from. So when I was picking high schools, the high school that I picked, we had a medical sciences track. And within that track, there was a special program that I joined, which allowed students to do a research project and write a thesis for graduation. And basically, that is where I began the research journey. And the reason being was that I was like, okay, by the time I become a physician, that's a very, very long time, and still is. I still have about a decade to go or so. So, but I took a step back and I said, look, how can I give back at this juncture in time? Because it may be a decade or more by the time I finish and become a full-fledged physician to actually treat patients, manage them, and hopefully give back in the same way that the providers who saved me when I was a child. So research seemed to be the ideal best route, because I could be contributing to novel therapies as I go along my clinical training and help to possibly save lives that are affected right there and then. Why wait 10 to 15 years to start making your impact? Why not start making your impact as early as age 16 or yes, age 16.
Very impressive. And jumping ahead a bit to now, obviously when COVID-19 struck the world and the US, you ended up being recruited by the global COVID task force in the States. And is it right that you're the youngest person on the task force, or one of the youngest people?
I am the youngest. Yes. Yes. So to tell you more about that, so I have a background in cancer immunotherapeutics. I'm fortunate to have been trained by one of the fathers of the field, and the knowledge and experience that I received from there has carried me to this day. So in the past, I had written a publication about, which is a review article about cancer immunotherapeutics and chimeric antigen receptors, CAR T cells, and their potential in future. And the task force, they came across that publication, and they realized that that there was an immunological mechanism behind COVID. And so they contacted me after reading that publication, and they essentially recruited me to serve initially as their special advisor for immunology, oncology, and cellular therapeutics, which was tasked with devising solutions and shaping policies to improve survival outcomes.
And yeah, when you got asked to get involved, I mean, how did that feel for you? You know, at just 30 years old, being tasked with such a huge thing during such a significant health crisis. How did that responsibility kind of make you feel?
So it was a bit overwhelming, but inspiring. At the time that COVID hit, all of the medical students across the country were essentially taken off of their clinical rotations. And the thing was, my parents were on the front lines because they were deemed as essential employees. So they were putting their lives on the line every day. A lot of my friends are residents in areas that were hit hard by COVID, and some even had COVID as a whole. They were putting their lives on the line every day. I was not comfortable with sitting at home just watching all of this unfold. At the end of the day, I was born in a pandemic, and I lived in it for the first 5 years of my life. So to be given this opportunity, I said, at the end of the day, it's my chance to at least contribute something. If they were putting their lives on the line, I could at least put my mind, channel it, and use the knowledge and experience that I've had to at least produce something fruitful.
And in sort of layman's terms, I don't know how easy this is to do, but for those of us on the call who don't come from a medical background, which could well be the majority of the people on this call, can you explain a bit about what exactly you're doing and your involvement in the kind of COVID response in the US?
Right. So initially, I was tasked with being a special advisor, but then I was tasked with an additional role. So they made me the director of their immunology group, which was involved in creating the first cohesive mechanism, and potentially the mechanism of COVID, along with therapeutic approaches. So basically, it was to look at COVID and say, how does COVID act, and what can we as a whole do to intervene? So I approached it from a immunological standpoint, looking at the literature, speaking with my colleagues in New York and in other hit places, and obviously with members of the task force who are on the front lines saving lives every single day as physicians, whether in the emergency room, as internal medicine providers, et cetera, et cetera. And in essence, we combined the virology of how a typical virus acts with the immunology to create and explain all of the symptoms that COVID has. In addition, we proposed therapeutic interventions. In the course of all of this, we saw that there is a synergism where basically when you have the flu and COVID, there's a point in the pathway where both of them intersect. And we drew the model for that as well, along with therapeutic approaches to intervene and prevent. And in our publication, which was released about 2 weeks ago ahead of print, the manuscript itself within the first few days received over 32 million views and was amongst the top 5 COVID-19 articles in the world, according to QXMD. In addition, it'll also be featured as the cover article on the journal Shock.
Wow. Okay. I feel like, thank you for explaining that in that language, because I know that obviously it's extremely complex, but that was really helpful to try and sort of understand exactly what you're doing. And obviously people on this call, you know, they're in all different cities all around the world, but I think COVID is something that is uniting everyone at the moment, no matter where you are. It's something to be really concerned about, and it's touching everyone's life. And I was wondering, as someone who's really working on the front line of this disease, whether you can share any sort of positive message about something to feel hopeful about at the moment?
Yes. So I will say, being in this pandemic, we have seen a lot of scientific progress come out in a very short time. Probably one of the quickest in history. I can't obviously give medical advice, but one of the things that we saw and we propose and we're advocating for is to prevent the onset of COVID flu, which is COVID plus the flu. Everyone get their flu shot. That is one of the things that we feel is at least the best way to at least contain this pandemic in the interim. In terms of therapeutic interventions, there are some promising therapies in clinical trials at the moment. However, they are still clinical trials, but there is hope, and hopefully there'll be hope on the horizon very soon. But we have made great strides in a very short period of time, and I'm hopeful that more can be made shortly.
Well, that's really good to hear. Thank you. And now I wanted to circle back to think about your Jewish heritage and your Jewish Belarusian heritage. And I was wondering if you could talk a bit. I know that you're a very spiritual person and Judaism is really important to you. I was wondering whether you could share a bit about what it was like for you growing up Jewish in Belarus and what your kind of earliest memories of being Jewish are.
So I'll be honest. Where I'm from, you really weren't allowed to practice your religion. We celebrated the high Jewish holidays, the main ones typically, behind closed doors, all the windows and shades closed, in a closet of 4 people, me, my 2 parents, and my grandma, huddled around lighting, let's say, Hanukkah candles and, eating some classic Jewish food. But you really couldn't freely express your religion. And my parents always told me that, you are this, but you can't tell anyone this. And as a child, that was very difficult to comprehend. Israel was really the first time where, while I was receiving treatment, I got to really experience and learn what it meant to be Jewish. But I became so intertwined with the culture and with the religion, how it fit me, that when I came back, the first thing that my mom said to me was, everything that you saw there, forget it. And as a child, that's very difficult to comprehend. But I was always very obedient, and so I did what my mom and my parents always taught me. And really, I couldn't express our religion, because if we did, let's just say, and the government found out, bad things would happen.
So it must have felt very strange for you moving to New York and suddenly being able to embrace your Jewish heritage and being openly Jewish. What was that like for you, coming from where you'd come from, and what was the contrast like?
It was a huge contrast. Just being in Brooklyn, being in New York, seeing the lights, seeing everything, it was a complete 360 change. It was something that both I nor my parents were used to. But we embraced this scenario as a new way of life, a new chance for opportunity. And I was always taught to have an open mind. So it was great, especially the one thing that I really love about America is the first time that I understood what it meant to be free. The freedoms of speech, the freedoms of religion, those were things that one didn't really have back where I came from. And to just be able to experience it for the first time, it felt really empowering. And over time, I was kind of ingrained and embedded into the culture, and here I am now.
Yeah, I can imagine that it would have felt really empowering. And what kind of impact do you think your Jewish Belarusian heritage has had on your career?
I was always taught to never forget where you came from. Having been born at a time that was turbulent, so to speak, but also with the restrictions that I had in terms of freedoms and elements to that effect, now being here in the US, it has made me appreciate the freedoms that much more. Taking the politics aside, things can always be improved, but at the end of the day, it's a blessing to be here. And I feel that because of the culture, because of the freedoms that we have here in the United States, I was able to thrive. And essentially, I was given like a clean slate, a clean sheet of paper to paint the narrative. And that's kind of what I feel like I'm trying to do. And we'll see what happens in the future.
That's exciting. And obviously, as a kind of Belarusian Jew in the diaspora, I was wondering what your connection still is to Belarus, and how, whether you ever go back, and do you still have family there? Do you still feel like you have strong ties to Belarus?
At the end of the day, you never forget where you came from. I realized where I came from, and in many ways, I do appreciate it, because the trials and tribulations that I lived through there helped to mold me into the person that I am here today. So had it not been for that, it may be strong enough to tackle the challenges that I have experienced thus far, and hopefully the challenges that I will experience. But essentially, I don't have any more ties there. All of my family has left, and I don't really see a need to go back. It's kind of, I feel like that's a closed chapter in my life, and I only look back at it for motivation and inspiration to propel myself forward.
Wow, that's really interesting. And where do you see yourself going next? I mean, after working on the COVID task force, it's such a huge job. Where do you think that will take you on to?
The one thing that I've learned throughout my whole life, and especially through COVID, is you never know what's going to happen tomorrow. So I approach everything with an open mind. At the end of the day, the ultimate goal is to be a physician, to be a compassionate, well-rounded provider who can provide his patients with the best possible care. Hopefully, I can live up to the name and the trade and the high bar that the physicians who saved me. And ultimately, I am interested in research as well. I feel that research and medicine, they parallel each other, and you can't have one without the other. I do have several years of research experience. And so I feel that taking into account the contributions that I've made, I would want to use the skills that I've attained to further contribute to novel discovery, and hopefully contribute to novel therapies to benefit the lives of patients at the end of the day. That's kind of what I feel I've been doing ever since high school. And that's kind of what I enjoy doing, and hope that I am allowed and able to pursue it.
Thank you for sharing your story with us today. And do you think there's anything that you'd like to share with the people on this call that perhaps I haven't asked you about?
So first of all, I want to say thank you for being here. It's truly a pleasure. I will say that despite the challenges that I've encountered in my life, I view them in a positive. There's an old saying, anything that doesn't kill you makes you stronger. So I feel that if we can all embrace the challenges that we have experienced respectively and channel them into a positive light, they can be used as a source for growth. At the end of the day, I feel like I was the child that was never supposed to make it. But through the will that I've developed over the years, through the great support system that I've had from my parents, my friends, my loved ones, I feel like I was able to overcome those obstacles. At the end of the day, I feel like I was saved for a reason. And being in this pandemic right here, right now, has given me a new sense of purpose and the opportunity to do what I feel is put on this earth to do. To use my research, my knowledge, my experience, and my insight to hopefully leave a positive mark on the world. Thank you.
Well, that's incredibly inspirational. And yeah, we're really honored to have you here today sharing your story. And thank you so much for the amazing work that you are doing with the COVID response. You know, everyone around the world, I'm sure, is very grateful for that.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure. And anything I can do to help, I gladly will.
Have there been any questions? I was wondering whether anyone had anything that they wanted to ask Jan.
Yeah, so we did have 2 questions come through during, but thank you so much, Jan. That was so interesting to listen to, really amazing. So one question which you might have actually already answered, but just wanted to confirm, someone asked, how old were you when you immigrated to America?
Yes. So I immigrated when I was about age 5. And I believe I started experiencing symptoms at about age 2 to age 3. So it was a few years. And then we moved, and now I'm just still happy in New York. So.
And did you move straight to New York?
Yes.
Wow. Cool. So we had another question from Debra Brunner, who is from the Together Plan. So she's looking for the stories of people with Belarusian Jewish ancestry, and that is what enabled her to find you. So what are your thoughts about the building of a Jewish cultural heritage trail in Belarus, and the fact that it helps to bring people together to tell their stories?
First of all, I want to commend her for everything that she's done and continues to do. Thank you for allowing me to speak at this forum. At the end of the day, I am not the only Jew. There are probably other ones, and I'm sure there are other ones. And what this forum does is it empowers people to who are currently there, hopefully, to see that they're those who are able to rise above. And we each have a role in life, and sometimes we have to go through trials and tribulations. But if you can use those trials and tribulations to become stronger, to better yourself, you can seek a positive outlet and truly find a way to achieve your true potential. I would say to those individuals that, you know, we can all be vehicles of change, but being a vehicle and being being that vehicle is your own definition of it. You define your own destiny. You define who you are. And what I say, if there's someone struggling there, I would say, hold on, focus on what you need to do. Turn your stress and anxiety into a vehicle to empower you to become the best version of yourself, so you can overcome and achieve what you are meant to be.
That's amazing. Thank you. So if anyone else on the call has any questions, I think the best way to do it is message me on the chat telling me you have a question, and I can either unmute you so you can ask it yourself to Jan, or I can read the question for you if you prefer. So yeah, just wait a couple of minutes to see if anyone messages me.
Jan, I was wondering whether I could ask you another question.
Yeah, of course. I have all the time in the world.
Obviously, you spoke about having to kind of keep your Judaism a secret when you were very young, and you weren't able to openly embrace your religion. And I was wondering whether whether you think that had anything to do with the fact that now you do feel so connected to your Judaism, and whether you think there's a connection between kind of having to suppress it and that strong kind of belief and faith you have now.
100%. I feel that is 100% accurate. It's kind of like, and sadly, in many ways, this is true. By nature, we may not fully appreciate something until it's gone. And I wasn't able to embrace who I was probably for the first 5 years until I was able to move to the United States and truly know what it meant to have the freedoms in our Constitution. And one of those freedoms was freedom of religion. I was able to actually freely to learn about my actual religion, learn about who I am, and understand and embrace it. And being able to do that has, I feel, allowed me to embrace the elements of my religion, but also the past that I have, and kind of intertwine them. And in essence, you can't take one away from the other. And so I tap into all of these elements every day. I am proud of who I am, and I will continue to be proud of who I am. And I embrace my past because I want to use the experiences I have lived to hopefully be a vehicle of change. And if I can make a positive difference in someone's life, then I've done my job.
Absolutely. And are you part of your local Jewish community in America then?
Yes. Yes. In New York, thankfully, there is a thriving community. Obviously, with COVID, you know, things are more socially distant, but I do keep in touch with my roots.
That's good to know. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
Yeah, so we haven't actually had any more questions come through. So I just wanted to say again, thank you so much to both of you, Jan and Kate, for that wonderful session. That really was so interesting. And yeah, thank you, Jan, so much for sharing your story. And I hope everyone here is really inspired by what you've all just heard. And of course, if you didn't get a chance to ask a question that you wanted to, or you think of one later, please let us know and we'll try and put you in contact with the presenter. So I just wanted to pass over to Debra to say a couple of words. I'll just unmute you, Debra.
Thanks, Georgina. So first of all, I just want to say thank you to Jan for being here. You really are quite an extraordinary individual, and I have immensely enjoyed getting to know you. And I feel very connected to you now, even though we have a lot of distance between us. And it was thanks to Evan Rabin in New York who introduced us. The power of networking when doors opened because of COVID, how ironic. And also to thank you to Kate. Kate has been an incredible part of the Together Plans journey. So just to say, as we've got a few minutes, and a lot of people won't know, or some of you will, but some of you won't, the part that Kate has played in the Together Plans journey. So in 2014, I was in Brest in the south of Belarus. And we had been introduced, well, we'd found this project where headstones were being found all around the town that used to belong to the Brest-Litovsk Jewish cemetery. And I saw these headstones, and it was quite extraordinary. I mean, I'd never seen anything like it, all these headstones from a cemetery, and the cemetery wasn't marked, and it had an incredible story. And my son Jacob was with me, and he went to school with Kate. And at the time, Kate was studying. She was doing a master's in journalism. She's now a journalist, but that was back then. So we got on the phone to Kate and said, Kate, there's this story. What do you think? And she was like, let's do it. Let's write it. So Kate pitched the story to Vice Online, saying to me at the time, I doubt they'll notice it. It takes forever. They never write back. And within 24 hours, they'd written back and said, we want to put this story together. We had another 24 hours to put it together. There was a hive of activity, and I think it was a sleepless night. Kate threw this story she put this story together, and it went viral. It went on to Vice. I got a phone call from the Daily Mail. It then went to the Times of Israel. I mean, this story went around the world, to the point where I was then invited to go to, I got an invitation to the Knesset to go and discuss it, because Brest was the hometown of Menachem Begin, and it touched some sort of political nerves. So I did. But we are now working towards building a memorial on the site of that cemetery using those headstones, and that's very exciting. But I just want to acknowledge Kate as part of our team, and we love her, and she's wonderful, and she really is, and yeah, she helped to get the story about Jan into the Jewish Chronicle, and just to sort of say we hugely value you.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Deborah, for those lovely words. And yeah, that was actually the first piece of journalism I was ever paid for. It was the very beginning of my entire career, where, you know, people actually took an interest in me and my writing. So not only was it a fantastic story and a very important story, but for me, it really kind of symbolizes the beginning of my career. So it was very special to me for lots of reasons. And thank you always for your support, and what you do is just fantastic.
No, well, it just goes to show, right, that the Together plan is a plan that works. So that, you know, we're trying to put the Jewish community and the Jewish story of Belarus back onto the world map. There are so many opportunities for people to shine along the way, and that's the point. And that is a real, that's at the core of what we do. So I'm really glad that this, you and Jan, and this story has enabled us to sort of put that out there to people who are watching and listening today. So thank you very much.
Okay. Well, thank you for the opportunity to be part of this amazing day.
Thanks, guys. That's fantastic. So just as a reminder, we have a short break now, and then the next session will begin at 5 o'clock. And there is a choice of 3. That is the Survivor Mitzvah Project, Chernobyl, Cancer and COVID-19, or Yiddish, the central element of Judaism in Belarus. You can find out more and join the next session by viewing the programme on our website. So I'll just unmute you all now to give you a minute to say thank you to Jan and Kate. And yeah, I look forward to seeing you all in another session. So have a great day.
Thanks, Georgina.